everybody, Arma here, G-Skills, and today we have another podcast, a podcast about our journey so far in internal alchemy.
Yeah.
Wow, I got that out right. Alchemy,
Wow.
transformation,
Yeah.
that's what we're all about.
Absolutely. So this is a great topic. I love it already.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it might be inspiring for people to hear our journey so far in transformation. And this word alchemy, it sounds so... So
what was your first encounter with
Well, this
alchemy?
word alchemy was on a record by Dire Straits that I got in the 80s. And I have it in my hand for the people only listening to this. This is a double live album by Dire Straits, which, well, they were sort of one of the most popular bands in that time. 1984 is this record.
Wow.
Whoa, that's long ago. But the record is called Alchemy, right? That's the name on the album. And, you know, I was playing this record and I still play it. But this word always sort of was like, what does that mean? You know, I didn't know what it meant. Now, of course, I know what it means, right? It's like, okay, so they play, right? They play live for an audience and there's this transformation going on, right? There's this, okay, they're playing from the stage and these people are reacting to it and are changed by this music, right? So
yeah, great. And you see it with the arrows as well. It's kind of a...
There's these fourth and back arrows, right?
Yeah.
Between
alchemy and Dire Straits live. So
this exchange that's going on, right? So I've been a musician for a long time, professional musician, before I started teaching this professionally. And I know that, right? That the impact you can have on people playing live and then what they give back, right? So this exchange of transformation. Music is only energy, right? It's vibration.
Yeah. So, but you got the album. At that time, you didn't really know what alchemy was.
No, but it changed me because the music of Dire Straits is one of the first. Well, in 1984, I was 11 years old, and I had an uncle in my house. He lived with us. He was 10 years younger than my mother, so he was a bit in between my elder brother's age and my mother's age. He was sort of so. He was not the uncle in the typical sense. He was younger, right? And he lived in a place behind the house. And he was really into music. So, and then he got me a cassette of Dire Straits. And I don't know what happened when I listened to that music, but something happened. There was like, oh my God, there's also this, right? There's this feeling and emotion that I sort of, I found pretty lacking growing up. I think growing up was pretty confusing for me because I'm a very sensitive human being. So when this music was there and I had these headphones and I would listen to it and I was just in my own world, in my own space and feeling good. So there was this, it was just not only the title of this album, it was also what music started doing with me, opening up feeling and being sensitive for this other, this other frequency.
Yeah.
I mean, you have this normal frequency. I mean, when you're 11 years old, you're
school.
Of course you're in school and all these expectations and things like that, and there's all these grown-ups around you, and most of them don't have any patience with you, or and then you put on music, and something just changes, right?
Yeah.
So it's not only the word alchemy there, but I think sort of a transformation started there. That I started looking for a certain feeling. I think.
Yeah. That got you into music in the first place. Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah. My favorite thing was just playing along. I started drumming and playing along with records, and it's just having this feeling of freedom. But also, if you look at the song is also a journey, right? It starts somewhere, and you go through all these things, and then then there comes the bridge, and then and there's the solo, and so and then you take these headphones off and you're back into the normal world, right? Normal world. So I think it started pretty young, that I was like, okay, there's this and there's that, and how can I get more of that?
Yeah.
but also being very confused by the extreme differences between these two worlds
Yeah.
and how you can feel in
Yeah.
these worlds, right?
Wow.
So music was very safe, but the world didn't feel quite safe. It was more like, whoa, like all these things that coming towards you and you have to deal with. I was very conscious of that growing
Wow.
up.
Yeah.
Looking at teachers, just staring at them, and then just trying. You were just trying to feel your environment, right?
Yeah.
And then also feeling that things are off with people. Some things just don't make sense, right?
Yeah.
How people react or how they do, and so
And that it didn't had, or as a child, you don't really understand that it sometimes had nothing to do with you, how a grown-up reacted to you. But it was their own thing. And
now you know that,
Yeah.
right? Then
Yeah.
you don't really know that, I think.
No.
But there's something off,
Yeah.
You're like, well,
Yeah.
what's going on here? And then you have this music, and you're like, so how about you? When did this come
alchemy.
into your
I
life?
think especially when I was young, I still loved to read. It's kind of the same. I would read every book that came into the door, and
Even the
what,
Bible, right? From front to back, right?
Oh yeah, I would just read
Amazing.
everything, and I would not stop. I would just, if I had books, then that was me. But I loved the books where there was transformation, and I would read books about alchemy. I was reading books far beyond my years, my mother would say.
Yeah.
But I was really kind of, for me, it felt like almost fairy tales. When talking about alchemy and people looking for eternal life and going to or trying kind of eating gold to gain eternal life, these stories. And but what I loved was people transforming. I think that really inspired me, and it kind of got me curious. But I didn't really know at that time what it meant or what it could mean.
Yeah.
So it was kind of more a story that was somewhere else. It was not for me per se, as it was mostly, most books were placed back in time when talked about alchemy and not in a modern setting. So
I understand, and I think it's already opening doors in you, right? You cannot name it yet, but you have these books about hero's journey, or and I think that really resonates. No.
And still, if I watch movies, I love the person to go through transformation. Then there is, for me, if there's no transformation. Transformation happening, then that's not a good movie.
No, you're bored.
So I love a good book where there's transformation going on.
Yeah, and that's quite something, because I think if you have that already on a young age, that says something. And I remember being very young. I think my younger brother was just born. Maybe he was half a year or a year old or something. And I at that period, I remember myself thinking about certain things and really being conscious of what I was thinking at that moment. And they were not always good thoughts. There were sometimes thoughts that I was like, I sort of was a little bit in shock of my own thoughts. And I was like, wow, I'm having these thoughts. Something is wrong with me.
Yeah, wow.
And I must have been 5 or something.
Quite young.
Yeah. And the other thing was, is that I always had this feeling that I didn't have time enough time.
Yeah.
An obsession with time.
Yeah.
I was already so aware of me dying at a certain point that is ridiculous. I mean, if you're 5, 6, 7 years old and already thinking about death and being afraid that you don't have enough time, what does that say? So that doesn't mean it's all about that doesn't mean that that's about transformation, but it would, there was an urge in me that something needed to happen in my life.
Yeah.
Right? You cannot name it yet, but there was, I don't want to call it fear per se, but there was this sort of obsession with time and death.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, well, I mean, it's not so much now, but especially when I first met you, you would always mention this.
Yeah. There's something I've got to do.
Yeah.
And then I grew up in the first school I went to was a Christian school, and I wasn't raised Christian per se. I was baptized, but we were just a modern family. We didn't go to church or anything. Yeah. But I was fascinated with these stories, especially about Jesus Christ. These stories, these miracles, and things like that. So. Yeah. That also was I was going beyond that, like, okay, there's Jesus, and I was so fascinated by him and him teaching stuff, and all these things come together at a pretty young age already.
Yeah. I love them. I always love those stories as well.
Yeah.
But any story. When I lived in Thailand for a year, and I loved all the stories about Buddhism as well, and the phases he went through, and all the I love
the ultimate transformation story, right?
Yeah, it is, and but all stories that are around religions, I love to read them. Yeah. They're all about this. So
they're all about this. Yeah. So I was recognizing that at a certain age, and you were also realizing something, like there's something there.
Yeah.
You don't know what, but there's something there.
Yeah.
So then I think if we move on a little bit later, and you live for a while, you get into trouble with yourself, right? Yeah. You hit your head here and you hit your head there. But I always was interested in interviews with people, also musicians. I was professional musician, but I was always interested in their training methods and how do you deal with yourself in certain situations, and how to get the best performance, or how to let go of wanting to have the best performance and stuff like that, right? So this transformation was seeking me until I hit a wall in my life, and I needed something, and that's when the training came in. But when you start training, you don't really know yet what it's all about, right? You start Tai Chi training and you think something must be there, but maybe it was more the martial aspect. You see enough martial arts movies and you see a transformation there, right? Yeah. That it's inspiring. Something like something must be there.
Yeah, and I think you got some examples in your life. You had, at the point that you were ready for it, you met...
Yeah, Graham Barry, Scotland, Langham, Scotland. Yeah, he came into my life as a Tai Chi teacher, and
exactly. And you were, I was gonna say obsessed, not obsessed, but you were intrigued.
Yeah,
very
totally
intrigued.
There's something going on here.
Yeah,
there's some sort of concentration, stillness around this that did something for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a powerful man, and he was just standing there, and you thought, wow, there's something in it for me.
Absolutely, there's something completely in it for me. Yeah, and then I start training myself, and the first thing I learned, and I've talked about this, is standing practice, right? And of all the things I was learning later on, also in the training, the standing practice became the one thing I would always train every day. Yeah, every day, year after year after year after year.
Wherever we were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that was the definite entry into alchemy for me, because that changed me very quickly.
Yeah.
Because I was so confronted with myself, just standing there in this pretty low position. I mean, if you talk about willpower and going through and just sustaining it for the time, all these things, right? And the inner conflict was like, the next day you're like, oh man, standing again, and you're like, no, I have to do it again. I have to do it again. There's something there for me. There's something there for me. There's something there for me. And of course, and with all alchemy training, it starts physically. Yeah. It's like, okay, alignment and getting used to this stress on the legs, and all these things. And then And of course, mentally, you get so, because you want to step out at sometimes. And you're like, no, I'm going to stand for 20 minutes. I'm going to stand for 20 minutes. And 20 minutes may not seem long, but the way we were standing pretty low, was long. It was long for me. And I was not strong at that point at all. So, that had the greatest impact in the training. And of course, because it was very Kung Fu, Tai Chi we were doing. So you're also getting confronted with partner training with people. It's like, oh, you feel your own resistance everywhere, and you feel, all this resistance that was absolutely exaggerated, in the training. So you get very confronted with yourself, and in all sorts of ways, and that starts a journey for sure. Yeah. And then in the training, of course, right from the beginning of the training, I already met you. Yeah. Right? And we were living together, so it had an impact on you as well. Yeah. And I think for me, I didn't do the exact same training as you did. You were kind of completely in the training, and I watched it from the side. And I had my own, I think I was still doing ballet at the time. Yep. And so I was kind of focused on my body and alignment with, and I was very much in my body, as from young age training ballet, and stepped over to yoga after that when my teacher stopped. But I was kind of looking from the side. Yeah. And I was also very much on my own journey and seeing what do I need in this time of my life. But I was very much influenced by you. Some stuff I would adopt and do. Yeah, so of course. Later on, the stretches, I would do that. And I would do Qigong with you as well. But talking about it and meeting your teachers and reading the books, because you brought a lot of books into the house. And what I was saying earlier, I would just, not as much as I was younger, but I would still look into all the books. And I think Taoism came into the house because, my teacher, Roel, he was so into that. And I had all these private lessons as well with him. It was not only group training, but I had a lot of private training with him, and we would always talk about these things. Transformation. It was so intriguing for me. So all these books by Eva Wong and Christopher Schipper, all these books about Taoism, they came into the house, right? Yeah. But also things like the Magus of Java, which is about John Chang setting things on fire, with his hands, and you come into a totally different world. And then what the difference was between the books that I would read as a child and growing up, they were set back in time, and still some of those books still are, but now you see people in this time going through that and doing the things that you think, is that humanly possible? Exactly. And then you think, oh, wow, so what's going on? And that was also the time that I was, your teacher gave me the book about food, and I was always interested in food. And so I went from the book to a course, and from that to a study, and studying traditional Chinese medicine, and also learning about a process of transformation, and it's a holistic study. But the thing that was really missing there was the feeling. Yeah. So the experience. The experience, yeah. Well, I was getting experiences myself, of course, with standing practice. I was not introduced to energy right from the start. I had to sort of figure it out for myself just by standing there, and by becoming more still in my standing practices. I got all these feelings, right? Like, oh, I feel something there, and I feel more heat and more this, and I slowly started connecting to the energy body. Yeah. So that came into our lives, but I think the training was pretty. training was really focused on martial aspect, and which I loved. And of course, there was a lot of talk about Taoism, but at a certain point, I was like, I have to move further and more forward with this. You know, I have to move really forward with these feelings and the stillness and this transformation that I was experiencing. And that's when I got introduced to Mark Rasmus by my teacher. He said, well, you should go train with him, you know, if you seek that sort of thing. And that took it to a whole different level. Yeah. Because, you know, that's the whole thing he's teaching is internal alchemy.
Absolutely.
From a hermetic standpoint. Yeah.
It's great how life gives you these opportunities, because we were going to Thailand at that time to visit my host parents.
Yeah.
And Mark Rasmus was actually like 200 kilometers away from
something
them.
Like that, yeah.
And so it's kind of the same with Graham, that you meet him in this time.
These people just come into your life, right?
Yeah, when you're ready.
Exactly ready, yeah, exactly. So I was training with Roel for a long time before that. And I think this foundation, having Kung Fu as a person, is such a great foundation to get introduced in that, because I think the development with Mark, it went really, really quickly, because I really understood what he was coming from and talking about. And then he introduced, everyone, that's what he does, is right from the bat, you're just starting, okay, this is energy. You have this building the bull exercise. If we're going to talk about energy, we have to feel energy, right? If we want to work with energy, which Qigong is, we have to have this feeling. And that's where what you meant just now is like, that's where we come together, is right? Yeah. Because in most schools where you study traditional Chinese medicine, they talk about Qi, but they don't do these exercises. They may do some Qigong, but they're just moving air. They're not, you know, they're not introduced into the feeling.
We didn't even do that. The only thing that, because we live together and we train together and doing these exercises and doing training the ball exercise and doing all the stretches and the vital breathing, I would already know.
Yeah.
And then going into school, I knew what it meant on another level.
Yeah.
I know my energy felt, I know the Qi and how it flows, and I can, you know, it has a deeper meaning.
Yeah.
And otherwise it's very abstract.
Very abstract. And the thing with Mark Rasmus, he developed this system where you can learn this stuff in such a short time. Yeah. Of course, the development of it, you know, goes deeper and deeper, and you can spend your whole life with that. But going through these plateaus of the Jing, Qi, the Shen, you know, the Wu Ji, Akasha, you know, and the light. But you know, the thing is, it's already there, right? Yeah. We're not making things up here. It's more like, okay, you have to learn how to tune into different frequencies, which are there, and it becomes almost like a scientific approach. How he brings it, right? Yeah. And I had this physics teacher here, and I was drawing it out, you know, the whole process. And he's like, "Oh, that's physics." Yeah. He's like, "Yeah, that's physics." But the thing with physics mostly is that, you know, it's not mostly talked about in human experience, right? It's more like, okay, we have this universe, and then there's all these powers, and there's you know, momentum, and then something hits something, and then you blah blah blah. But how about yourself, right? Yeah.
Thank you for listening so far.
Yeah, it's a long podcast, so we're cutting it up in 2 parts. So enjoy it next week.